Most people imagine the tabernacle as a simple tent, a temporary shelter stitched together by nomads, pitched and dismantled as the Israelites wandered through the wilderness. Something fragile, something improvised, something that existed only because there was no other option. That image is completely wrong. What stood in the middle of the desert was not simple. It was not improvised. It was not fragile. By every practical measure, it should not have existed at all. In a landscape defined by scarcity, no stone quarries, no forests, no furnaces, no infrastructure, an architectural project began that required absolute precision, extreme heat, advanced craftsmanship, and flawless execution. Gold had to be melted, silver had to be cast, wood had to be shaped to millimeter accuracy, fabrics had to be woven with mathematical complexity, and not one measurement could be altered, not one shortcut could be taken. Because this structure was not meant to house people, it was meant to house God. The blueprint for the tabernacle did not originate in the desert. It came from the mountain. When Moses ascended Sinai, he was not given vague ideas or symbolic suggestions. He was shown a pattern, a complete design, measurements, materials, proportions, everything specified with uncompromising clarity. Scripture is deliberate in its language. God did not say, "Build something like this." He said, "Build it exactly as you were shown." The implication is staggering. Moses did not merely receive instructions. He saw something, a form, a structure, a heavenly original that the earthly version was required to mirror with absolute fidelity. The tabernacle was not a creative project. It was a replication. And the people who would be tasked with reproducing this celestial design were not trained architects, engineers, or goldsmiths. They were former slaves. For generations, their hands had known only forced labor, brick molds, mud pits, straw bundles. Their lives in Egypt were defined by repetition, exhaustion, and obedience under threat of violence. Precision was never rewarded. Creativity was never cultivated. Survival was the only skill that mattered. Yet these were the hands chosen to build the dwelling place of the Creator of the universe. That is where the story becomes impossible. Because divine precision does not coexist easily with human limitation. The tabernacle demanded perfection. Its components were sacred. Its materials were rare. Its tolerances were unforgiving. A single error could compromise the entire structure. And in the presence of holiness, error was not merely inconvenient, it was lethal. God did not lower the standard to match the people. He elevated the people to meet the standard. And he began by calling one man by name. Among thousands, Bezalel was chosen, not because of lineage, not because of status, but because God filled him with something no slave had ever been given before: wisdom, understanding, knowledge, and skill in craftsmanship. This was not talent development. It was transformation. Bezalel did not simply know how to work with gold. He understood design. He could translate vision into structure. He could read the blueprint of heaven and make it real in the dust of Sinai. But even that was not enough. One man could not build the tabernacle alone. The project was too vast, the labor too intense, the timeline too demanding. And so God did something equally radical. He enabled teaching. Former slaves became students, and then they became artisans. Men who had never shaped anything but bricks learned to carve wood that would never rot. Men who had never seen molten metal learned to control fire hot enough to liquefy gold. Women who had spun thread only for survival learned to weave fabrics worthy of royalty. The desert became a workshop, and the first challenge was fire. Gold does not forgive mistakes. To shape it, it must be heated beyond 1,000 degrees. Too little heat, and it cracks. Too much, and it is ruined. In Egypt, such temperatures were achieved in established foundries with specialized fuel and permanent kilns. But Sinai had none of that. No coal, No hardwood forests, no infrastructure, only sand, stone, and scrub. Yet the gold melted. The solution was hidden in what looked useless. Acacia trees, twisted, thorn-covered, and stubborn, grew across the desert. When reduced to charcoal, acacia burned hotter and longer than ordinary wood. Combined with clay furnaces molded directly from desert soil and fed by leather bellows, the fire intensified. Men worked in shifts, pumping air without pause. The heat was brutal, the risk constant. Molten metal splashed, tools scorched skin, water evaporated before it could cool the body. And the work did not stop, because the objects being formed were not optional. Every utensil, every fixture, every sacred piece had to be made exactly as commanded, none more demanding than the lampstand. The menorah was not assembled. It was not welded. It was hammered from a single piece of pure gold. 1 talent, roughly 35 kilograms, worked into a flawless form. One mistake, and the entire mass would have to be melted down and started again. Former slaves stood before an impossible fire, shaping gold into obedience. And as the metal was refined by heat, something else was happening. They were being refined too. They were no longer slaves following orders under a whip. They were builders following a vision. Every hammer strike carried meaning. Every finished piece testified to a new identity. They were not making objects. They were preparing a place where God would dwell among them. And this was only the beginning. The fire was burning. The gold was flowing. The blueprint was alive. The impossible had already started to happen. While fire roared and gold flowed, another kind of labor unfolded in silence. Away from the furnaces and the hammering metal, the framework of the tabernacle began to take shape. This work was slower, heavier, less spectacular to the eye. But without it, nothing else would stand. God did not ask for stone. He did not ask for cedar from distant mountains. He asked for acacia wood. To anyone who knew the desert, the choice sounded almost absurd. Acacia was crooked, thorn-ridden, dense, and unyielding. It did not grow straight. It did not grow tall. It resisted the blade. It punished the hand. But it possessed one quality that mattered more than beauty or ease. It endured. It resisted rot. It repelled insects. It survived heat, drought, and time. The same tree that survived the desert would become the bones of God's dwelling in the desert. Each plank had a precise requirement. Approximately 4.5 meters tall, uniform in width, perfectly straight, no bends, no warping, no compromise. The problem was obvious the moment the first tree was cut. Acacia did not grow that way. Every trunk twisted, every branch fought the saw. Transforming that wood into straight boards was not carpentry. It was combat. Men who had spent their lives stacking bricks now wrestled with saws that bit slowly into iron-hard grain. They planed for hours, scraping away splinters that tore skin and embedded themselves deep in calloused hands. The wood resisted at every step. It dulled tools. It broke handles. It demanded patience that slavery had never allowed them to learn. One plank could take days. And when it was finally finished, smoothed, measured, corrected, it was not set aside as complete. It was lifted, examined again, and then covered entirely in gold. The transformation was total. Crooked desert would disappear beneath pure brilliance. What had once been thorny and overlooked became untouchable, sacred, reflective. No one would ever see the acacia once the gold was applied, but without it, nothing would stand. 48 identical planks were required. Not 47, not 49. Everyone had to match. Everyone had to align. Because these were not decorative walls. They were load-bearing elements in a structure that would be assembled and dismantled hundreds of times. And here the design revealed something extraordinary. The tabernacle had no foundations, no stones buried in the ground, no posts driven into the earth, nothing permanent. It was a structure meant to move when God moved. But tall, gold-covered planks cannot simply stand on sand. They would sink, they would tilt, they would collapse under their own weight. The solution came in silver. Each plank was cut with 2 pegs at its base. These pegs fit into solid silver sockets, 2 per board. Each socket weighed roughly 1 talent. around 35 kilograms of pure silver per base, heavy enough to anchor, precise enough to align, portable enough to move. These were not decorations. They were engineering. When placed on the desert floor, the silver base's distributed weight resisted shifting and provided stability without a single nail driven into the ground. Gravity did the work. Precision did the rest. But vertical stability was not enough. Walls standing alone would sway, twist, and fail under wind and movement. And so God commanded crossbars, long beams of acacia, also covered in gold, that ran through rings mounted on the planks. These bars tied the entire structure together, wall to wall, transforming individual boards into a single unified body. Once assembled, the tabernacle behaved like one piece. This was not ancient improvisation. It was modular construction, a prefabricated system designed for repeated assembly without degradation. Each joint was protected, each measurement preserved. The structure could be taken apart and rebuilt without loosening, without warping, without weakening. And it would be, for 40 years. Every time the cloud lifted, the tabernacle came down. Every time the cloud rested, it rose again. The boards did not crack. The joints did not fail. The alignment did not drift. Because the design was exact. Because obedience preserved integrity. While the men labored over wood and silver, another transformation unfolded nearby. Quiet, methodical, and equally precise. The women worked the threads. God demanded beauty inside his dwelling. Not decoration for human admiration, but an interior that reflected something heavenly. The fabrics were not secondary. They were structural elements of holiness. Fine linen was required. Not coarse cloth, not rough weaving. Linen spun thin, strong, and smooth. And woven into it, directly into the fabric itself, were cherubim. Not stitched on afterward. Not embroidered as decoration. Woven. This meant the design had to be planned before the first thread was set. Colors had to be counted. Patterns calculated. Threads aligned. One miscount would distort the image. One mistake would ruin weeks of work. The colors themselves were rare. Blue, purple, crimson. These dyes did not come from plants in the desert. They came from crushed marine mollusks, each yielding only a trace of pigment. The materials had been carried out of Egypt on the night of departure, gathered as offerings when the people were commanded to give willingly. Possessing the dye was only the beginning. Threads were dipped, dried, dipped again. Sunlight fixed the color. Repetition deepened it. Precision preserved consistency. The work demanded patience under heat, dust, and exhaustion. And yet the result was extraordinary. From the outside, the tabernacle looked unimpressive. Layers of skins, earth tones, nothing that announced its significance. But inside, the walls shimmered with color. Cherubim hovered above. Gold reflected lamplight. The space felt ordered, intentional, alive. The sacred was hidden beneath the ordinary. This was not accidental. It was theology and structure. God did not reveal his glory to casual observers. He revealed it to those who entered according to his design. And as the walls rose and the fabrics took shape, another set of garments was being prepared, garments that stood between life and death. The priestly garments were not ceremonial clothing. They were protective equipment. Entering God's presence was not symbolic. It was dangerous. Every stitch mattered. Every measurement mattered. The high priest would carry the weight of an entire nation on his chest. Stones engraved with the names of the tribes rested over his heart. Gold chains secured the breastplate. Bells lined the hem of his robe, not for beauty, but for survival. As long as the bells rang, he lived. Silence meant death. The garments announced a truth the people understood deeply by now. Proximity to holiness demanded exact obedience. And still, the work continued. Wood, silver, gold, fabric, stone, each piece prepared in parallel, each according to a pattern that could not be altered. The skeleton stood. The interior waited. All that remained was the moment everything would be assembled. And the question no one dared to ask aloud hovered in the desert air. Would God accept it? The answer was coming. The command came quietly, without spectacle. On the first day of the first month of the second year after leaving Egypt, Moses was told to raise the tabernacle. Almost a full year had passed since the Red Sea had split open. A year of fire on the mountain. A year of learning precision. A year of transforming slaves into builders. And now, The moment everything had been leading toward arrived. There would be no trial run, no corrections afterward. The tabernacle would either stand exactly as God had commanded, or it would fail before the presence it was meant to host. The silver bases were placed first. One by one, they were positioned directly onto the desert floor. Heavy, cold, gleaming in the early light. There was no margin for misalignment. Each base had to sit exactly where the corresponding plank would rise. A hand's width off, and the entire wall would shift. A small deviation at the bottom would become a catastrophic error at the top. Men worked slowly, measuring and remeasuring, pressing the bases into the sand until they were level and firm. Then the planks came. Each gold-covered board required multiple men to lift. The weight was immense. The surface was smooth and unforgiving. A slip could damage the gold or injure a worker. Carefully, the pegs at the base of each plank were lowered into the silver sockets. When they locked into place, the board stood upright on its own. One plank became two. Two became a wall. As the structure rose, sunlight reflected off the gold, turning the desert air bright and harsh. A skeleton of glory emerged from the sand. Not decorative, not symbolic. Real. The crossbars followed. Long beams slid through gold rings, binding the walls together. As each bar was secured, the structure stiffened. What had once been individual elements became a single body. The tabernacle could now stand. Then the coverings were added. First, the inner linen, woven with cherubim, placed carefully so the designs aligned perfectly. These were the closest fabrics to the presence of God, visible only from within. Over them went the goat hair covering, then the red-dyed skins, and finally the outer protective layer that shielded everything beneath from sun and storm. From the outside, nothing had changed. It still looked like a tent. Inside, heaven waited. The furnishings were carried in next. The Ark of the Covenant was placed in the most holy place. The mercy seat rested upon it, its cherubim facing one another in silence. The veil was hung, separating the space where no one could enter from the space where only one could, and only once a year. The table of the bread of the presence was positioned. 12 loaves were arranged carefully, one for each tribe. The lampstand was set in place, and when it was lit, 7 flames reflected endlessly in the gold-covered walls. Light multiplied. The altar of incense was positioned, and the fragrance rose, filling the space with a scent unlike anything in the desert. Outside, the bronze altar stood ready. The basin was filled with water. Every detail aligned, every instruction fulfilled. Moses walked through the tabernacle, checking each element. He did not rush. He did not assume. He verified. The pattern shown on the mountain had been followed. And then something happened that no human effort could produce. A cloud descended. It did not drift in like mist. It did not scatter like dust. It moved with intention, thick and heavy, settling over the tent of meeting. The air grew dense. The light dimmed. The interior filled with something that could be felt as much as seen. The glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle, so completely that Moses could not enter. This was not fear. Moses had faced fire on Sinai. He had stood before God in ways no other man had. But this was different. The dwelling had been accepted. The space was now occupied. What had been built by human hands was no longer merely human. The presence stayed. From that day forward, the cloud became Israel's compass. When it lifted, they moved. When it settled, they stopped. The tabernacle rose and fell with it, again and again, year after year. 40 years of assembly, 40 years of disassembly. Across valleys, plains, and wilderness, the structure endured. The silver bases held. The joints remained true. The fabrics did not fail. The design did not degrade. It worked because it was never adjusted. Obedience preserved function. The tabernacle became the heart of the nation. Wherever it stood, God was there. And wherever God was, there was direction, order, and identity. But even as it stood in glory, it was never meant to be permanent. When Israel entered the land, the tabernacle rested at Shiloh. Years passed. Generations rose and fell. The tent still stood, quietly bearing witness to a journey completed. And then a king looked at it and felt something was wrong. David lived in a house of cedar. Solid, permanent, impressive. And yet the ark of God still dwelt behind curtains. The contrast troubled him. The tent that had once been necessary now felt insufficient. David wanted to build a temple. God refused him, not because the desire was wrong, but because the timing was not his. The promise would pass to his son. The tabernacle had served its purpose. It had been a beginning. Every board, every socket, every thread woven in the desert pointed forward. The mobile dwelling prepared the way for a permanent one. The tent of meeting prepared the way for the temple. And beyond that, something even greater. The tabernacle was where heaven touched sand. But it was not the final meeting place between God and man. That story continues. The tabernacle stood in silence long after the desert journeys ended. Its walls no longer rose and fell with the cloud. Its silver bases no longer pressed into fresh sand. The marches had stopped. Israel had crossed the Jordan. The wilderness was behind them. Cities were built. Fields were planted. Stone replaced tents. But the dwelling place of God remained the same. Curtains, skins, a structure designed for movement, now standing still. For years, the tabernacle rested at Shiloh. Priests ministered. Sacrifices were offered. The rituals continued exactly as commanded in the desert. The presence of God still descended. The system still worked. Yet something felt unfinished. The people now lived in permanent houses, while God still dwelled in a structure meant for pilgrims. What once symbolized closeness now began to feel like a limitation. It was King David who finally spoke what many had felt but never said aloud. "I dwell in a house of cedar," he said, "but the ark of God dwells within curtains." David's desire was sincere. He did not want glory for himself. He wanted to honor God with permanence. Stone instead of fabric, height instead of portability. A house that would not move because God's people had finally arrived. But God's response was unexpected. David would not build the temple, not because the idea was wrong, but because the story was bigger than David. The task would belong to Solomon. The tabernacle, God revealed, was never meant to be the final structure. It was a shadow, a preparation, a living blueprint that taught Israel how holiness worked before they were ready for permanence. Everything about the tabernacle pointed forward. Its mobility taught that God was not confined to geography. Its precision taught that holiness demanded obedience. Its layers taught that access to God was possible, but ordered. Its sacrifices taught that sin required blood. Its priesthood taught that mediation was necessary. The tabernacle was theology in motion. When Solomon finally built the temple, he did not invent something new. He expanded what already existed. The layout remained familiar. The holy place, the most holy place, the altar, the lampstand, the table, the veil. What changed was scale. What was once portable became monumental. What was once hidden in fabric became revealed in stone. Gold multiplied. Space expanded. The structure rose higher than anything Israel had ever built. When the temple was completed and dedicated, fire fell from heaven. The glory returned. Once again, the priest could not stand to minister. The pattern held, but even the temple was not the end. Centuries passed. Kings failed. The people rebelled. The temple was defiled, repaired, expanded, and eventually destroyed. Stones were thrown down. Gold was stripped. The dwelling place of God was reduced to rubble. And yet, something astonishing happened. God did not rebuild the temple immediately. Instead, he changed the pattern. The final dwelling place would not be made of wood, silver, or stone. It would be made of flesh. The Gospel of John describes it with deliberate language. The Word became flesh and tabernacled among us. Not metaphorically, literally. God returned to dwell among his people, not in a tent, not in a temple, but in a human body. Jesus did not abolish the tabernacle system. He fulfilled it. He became the priest. He became the sacrifice. He became the veil torn open. He became the meeting place between heaven and earth. Every detail of the tabernacle suddenly made sense. The lampstand pointed to the light of the world. The bread of the presence pointed to the bread of life. The mercy seat pointed to grace. The blood on the altar pointed to the cross. And the dwelling place of God was no longer centralized in one location. It moved again, but this time, it moved into people. You are the temple, Scripture declares. The Spirit of God dwells in you. The same God who once descended into a tent in the desert now chose hearts as his dwelling place. The tabernacle was never about architecture. It was about proximity, from Sinai to Shiloh, from the temple to the cross, from stone to spirit. The journey was always forward. That is why the tabernacle matters, not because it was ancient, but because it reveals how God works. He begins with obedience before understanding. He uses ordinary people for impossible designs. He hides glory beneath simplicity, and he never reveals the full picture all at once. The tent in the desert was not primitive. It was prophetic, and once you see it, you realize something profound. The most impressive construction of antiquity was not the Temple of Solomon. It was the blueprint God trusted former slaves to build, exactly as he showed them. One board, one socket, one thread at a time. If this story changed how you see scripture, history, or the purpose behind God's designs, follow the channel. There is much more hidden beneath the surface of the biblical text, and the next revelation is already waiting.